He told her the pregnancy was her fault and slammed the door, but a year later, the millionaire CEO collapsed to his knees when he saw her standing beside a triple stroller filled with 3 little girls who had his blue eyes. Emma never imagined that a single sentence could break her so completely, nor that it would replay in her mind with such brutal clarity for months afterward. She stood in the doorway of Liam Carter's penthouse that night, clutching the positive pregnancy test with trembling fingers, her heartbeat loud enough to drown out the sounds of the city far below. She had rehearsed what she would say to him, practiced it in the bathroom mirror, whispered it to herself on the taxi ride over. She wasn't expecting him to fall to his knees with joy or sweep her into his arms like in the movies, but she had secretly hoped for a flicker of softness in his eyes, some sign that the man she loved still existed beneath the layers of ambition and pride. Instead, Liam barely looked at the test. His expression didn't shift. His jaw didn't soften. He didn't even step closer. He stood there, tall, brown-haired, blue-eyed, impeccably dressed, staring at her like she had handed him a problem to solve rather than a life they had created together. Then, with a voice so emotionless it sliced straight through her, he said, "It's your own fault you got pregnant." For a moment, Emma didn't react. Her brain refused to attach meaning to the words. She had heard cruelty before, heard judgment and disappointment from people she barely knew, but never from him. Never from the man whose hand she had held, whose laughter she had memorized, whose smile she once believed held warmth meant only for her. She blinked, waiting for him to correct himself, to say he didn't mean it, to admit it came out wrong. But he simply turned away, walked to the door, and, without looking at her even once more, slammed it so hard the sound echoed through her bones. The hallway outside was cold. Watching her reflection tremble in the elevator mirror on the way down, Emma felt the first crack spread through her chest. She wrapped both arms around herself as though trying to keep her heart from falling apart right there between marble floors and golden accents. It wasn't just rejection, it was disownment. A ripping away of everything she thought they had built. She walked out into the night feeling weightless in the worst way, like gravity had let go of her. The city lights blurred, not from tears at first, but from disbelief. She wandered without destination, her feet moving long after her mind had frozen. When the tears finally came, they came in waves, hot, unstoppable, humiliating, the kind of sobs that left her breathless and empty. She spent the following days trapped between nausea, fear, and a grief she didn't know how to handle. Her phone stayed silent. No messages from him. No calls. No apologies. Nothing. It was as if he'd erased her. As if she had never existed. As if the child growing inside her was nothing more than an inconvenience he refused to acknowledge. Emma tried to eat but food tasted like ashes. She tried to sleep but every time she closed her eyes she heard his voice again. She tried to tell herself she didn't need him, but her mind kept replaying the warmth of him holding her after long days, the quiet comfort of lying next to him, the softness she was sure he was capable of, softness she no longer knew how to find. A week later she made her first doctor's appointment. She almost cancelled it twice. When the ultrasound monitor flickered to life and the doctor pointed out the heartbeat, something inside her shifted. She inhaled sharply, eyes widening at the tiny flicker pulsing with determination. It was surreal. Beautiful. Fragile. Terrifying. She cried again, but these tears were different, they were tears of awe. Tears of a promise taking shape. But the shock wasn't over. At her next appointment the doctor's tone changed, gentle but surprised. "Emma, there are 2 heartbeats." Her breath caught. 2. Then, almost immediately after, "Wait. I hear a 3rd." The room spun. Her chest tightened. She stared at the screen, trying to comprehend what she was seeing. 3. 3 lives. 3 tiny beating hearts. 3 futures tied to hers. That night she sat alone on her bed with the ultrasound photos spread around her like fragile pieces of a new reality. She traced their shapes with her finger, whispering to them softly, letting her heartbreak mix with an overwhelming surge of protectiveness. "Yes, it's going to be hard," she murmured. "But you're mine. And I won't let anyone make you feel unwanted." Fear still clung to her, thick and heavy, but beneath it something new began to grow, a quiet, fierce strength she didn't know she possessed. Liam's words echoed in her head. "It's your own fault you got pregnant." She pressed her hand to her stomach, inhaled, and let the truth settle inside her like a vow. "I'll carry you. All three of you. Even if I have to do it alone." And with that, Emma finally allowed herself to turn away from the man who slammed a door in her face. And toward the three little lives that would soon become her entire world. Emma's new life began not with a dramatic decision but with a quiet, shaky morning when she woke to sunlight filtering through her curtains and realized she couldn't stay, not in the city, not in the apartment where every corner whispered his name, not anywhere that reminded her of the slammed door and the hollow space he left behind. She packed slowly, folding clothes with trembling hands, stopping every few minutes when nausea overtook her or when fear pressed too tightly against her ribs. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed distance, physical and emotional, from the world that had rejected her so easily. By afternoon she had called her parents, booked a bus ticket, and left the city skyline shrinking behind her like a receding nightmare. The small town where her parents lived felt like a different universe. Wide streets, quiet evenings, old trees bending over sidewalks like guardians. The air smelled of pine and bread from a family-owned bakery down the block. The first night she spent in her childhood room felt surreal, like she had stepped into a version of herself she barely recognized. Her parents were gentle, careful not to overwhelm her with questions, offering comfort in the form of warm soup and blankets. Her mother touched her cheek softly and said, "You're safe here," and Emma burst into tears without warning, because she hadn't realized how deeply she needed those words. Pregnancy with 3 children felt like carrying the weight of a small universe inside her. Her body changed quickly and dramatically. Morning sickness wasn't confined to mornings, it struck whenever it pleased, leaving her pale and unsteady. Her belly grew faster than anyone expected, stretching her skin, tugging at her back until she had to sit down every 20 minutes. She walked as though balancing a bowl of water, careful, deliberate, afraid that even breathing too sharply would disturb the fragile world inside her. Despite the discomfort, she found herself cradling her stomach unconsciously, whispering soothing phrases, letting her hands linger on each new curve. Her parents tried to help however they could. Her mother accompanied her to every checkup, holding her hand tightly whenever the doctor's expression changed. Her father, usually stoic, spent evenings assembling baby furniture even though Emma kept reminding him she didn't know which crib she would ultimately use. "Doesn't matter," he would grumble, tightening screws, "they'll need something." Their quiet devotion brought her more healing than any words. As the pregnancy developed, the reality of raising triplets became impossible to ignore. Her doctor warned her about complications, premature birth, exhaustion, the strain on her body. Emma absorbed the information without blinking, nodding as though preparing for battle. But sometimes at night, when the house was quiet and the babies fluttered inside her like tiny fish swimming beneath her skin, she felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what lay ahead. She imagined the sleepless nights, the financial strain, the fear of being enough for 3 children who would depend entirely on her. She imagined doing it all alone, and her chest tightened with anxiety. Still, she didn't reach for her phone. She refused to call Liam. She refused to give him another chance to wound her. Even when loneliness settled heavily on her shoulders, even when the babies kicked in unison and she wished for someone to share the moment with, she stayed silent. His absence hurt, but his presence had the power to destroy her all over again. Her pregnancy became the rhythm of her days. Early mornings spent sipping herbal tea and watching the sun rise. Afternoons reading books on newborn care until she fell asleep out of exhaustion. Evenings where she sat on the porch wrapped in a warm sweater, hands resting on her belly, whispering stories of the future she wanted to build, one filled with laughter and safety, not slammed doors and cold sentences. She imagined her daughters with curly brown hair and bright blue eyes, running through the yard, giggling, holding hands the way siblings often did. She imagined watching them grow and wondered who they would become. Strangers in town began recognizing her, the pregnant woman carrying 3 lives at once. People complimented her strength, offered help, brought casseroles, donated old baby clothes. A woman from the grocery store gave her a set of tiny matching blankets she had knitted herself. Emma thanked them all with quiet gratitude, surprised to find kindness in places she never expected. But despite the support, the nights were the hardest. Lying awake, feeling the babies shift and tumble, Emma often found her mind drifting to Liam. Not because she missed him, but because she mourned the version of him she once believed in. She wondered if he ever thought of her. If he ever regretted anything. If he knew he was going to be the father of not 1 child but 3. She suspected he didn't. She refused to dwell on what he deserved to know. Sometimes anger flared, hot and sharp, at the memory of his words. Sometimes sadness softened her resolve, leaving her questioning everything. But every time she looked at the ultrasound photos lined up on her nightstand, her heart settled. These 3 little beating hearts were her purpose now. They were her beginning, her battle, her future. By the time she entered her 3rd trimester, her belly was round and heavy and magnificent, stretching against her dresses like she carried the moon. Her doctor warned her she might need to deliver early. Her parents prepared for the possibility with quiet urgency. Emma herself tried to remain calm, taking deep breaths whenever fear threatened to overwhelm her. In quiet moments she placed her hands over the curve of her belly and whispered, "I'm here. I won't fail you." She didn't know then how much strength she would still need, how many tears she would shed, or how dramatically her world would twist again. All she knew was that she had chosen her children long before they took their first breaths. And that choice, steady, painful, relentless, was already remaking her into someone stronger than she ever believed she could be. Emma's labor began on a rainy evening, the kind of evening where the sky felt heavy and close, as if the clouds themselves sensed what was coming. She had been feeling contractions off and on for days, but this time they sharpened, tightening her belly with a rhythm that left no doubt. Her mother rushed to her side the moment she heard Emma's sharp exhale, while her father sprinted for the car even before anyone said the word hospital. The world felt blurry as they drove through winding streets, raindrops streaking across the windshield like hurried tears. Emma tried to steady her breathing, clutching her mother's hand as another wave of pain rippled through her, but she couldn't stop thinking, 3 babies, 3 lives, 3 vulnerable hearts relying entirely on her strength. At the hospital everything moved too quickly and not quickly enough. Nurses guided her into a delivery room, doctors murmured about premature labor and fetal monitoring, machines blinked with unfamiliar lights. Emma felt overwhelmed but also oddly calm, as if a deeper instinct had stepped forward to guide her through the chaos. She focused on each breath, each contraction, each flicker of movement inside her. When the doctor explained that due to the positioning of the babies she needed an emergency C-section, her stomach tightened with fear, but she nodded. She didn't care about the pain or the scar she would carry for the rest of her life, she only cared that her daughters would survive. The operating room was cold, bright, and sterile. Emma lay on the table, her heart pounding as the anesthesiologist murmured reassurance, and her mother stroked her hair with shaking fingers. Time became strange, stretching and collapsing all at once. She couldn't see what the doctors were doing, but she felt pressure, tugging, movement, and heard their hushed instructions. For a moment she feared something was going wrong, but then, suddenly, a small cry pierced the air. A single high-pitched wail, soft and fierce at the same time, the first sound one of her daughters ever made. Emma gasped, tears slipping down her temples, and whispered, "My baby, that's my baby." Another cry followed almost immediately, then another, 3 distinct voices, 3 fragile declarations of life. Her heart felt like it cracked open all over again, but this time not from pain. From awe, raw, overwhelming awe. She couldn't fully see them yet, but she heard them, breathed with them, felt them in every part of her. The nurses worked swiftly, checking their vitals, wrapping them in tiny blankets, and finally bringing each girl close enough for Emma to see. They were so small, impossibly small, their features delicate and perfect. All 3 had wisps of soft brown hair and wide blue eyes that blinked slowly in the harsh light. Emma reached out her trembling hand and touched the foot of the first baby brought to her. She felt warmth, softness, life. Her breath hitched, her eyes filled, and she whispered, "Hello, my love." She did the same for the next 2, whispering their names in her heart even though she hadn't spoken them aloud yet: Claire, Ellie, Hazel. She felt an almost sacred sense of recognition when she looked at each face. As if she had known them forever. As if they had always been part of her soul. Recovery was painful. The incision burned with every movement, and exhaustion settled into her bones. But nothing compared to the moment the nurses placed all 3 babies in her arms at once. She was propped against pillows, still weak, but when the girls were nestled against her chest, warm, tiny, breathing softly, she felt a strength she didn't know she possessed. Their heads rested against her skin, their fingers curled like delicate tendrils, their bodies rising and falling with sleepy breaths. For the first time since that horrible night in the penthouse, Emma felt truly whole. She stared at her daughters, memorizing their faces, one with a tiny swirl of hair on her forehead, another with slightly more alert eyes, the third with a faint birthmark near her left ear. They were identical and yet uniquely themselves. They were a miracle carved into 3 small bodies. But motherhood began ruthlessly fast. Within hours she was feeding 1 baby while 2 cried, then switching, then soothing, then somehow comforting all 3 at once. Nurses helped, her parents helped, but Emma insisted on doing as much as she could herself. She wanted her daughters to know her touch, to feel her warmth, to recognize her voice above all others. When nurses took them for routine tests, her heart twisted painfully, and she counted the minutes until each one was returned to her arms. Sleep became a luxury she no longer remembered. Her body ached from the surgery, her arms trembled from holding so much fragile life, and tears pricked at her eyes each time she wondered whether she was enough. But every time she leaned over their bassinets and saw 3 pairs of blue eyes blinking up at her, something fierce unfurled inside her chest, a mother's fire, steady and unbreakable. One evening, a few days after giving birth, Emma was finally alone with her daughters as the hospital wing grew quiet. Soft lamplight filled the room. She pulled their bassinets close, placing her hands inside them so each girl could hold onto one of her fingers. They squeezed instinctively, tiny hands gripping her skin with surprising strength. Emma let out a shaky laugh, her throat tightening with emotion. "You're safe," she whispered. "I promise you're safe. And I'm here. Always here." The girls made soft cooing sounds in response, and for the first time since she left Liam's apartment, all those months ago, Emma felt no fear of the future. Only determination. Only love. Only a sense of quiet certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would conquer them for her daughters. That night she stayed awake longer than she should have, watching the steady rise and fall of their chests, listening to the quiet harmony of their breathing. And as dawn painted the sky outside in soft shades of lavender and gold, Emma knew her life had changed forever. Not because of pain. Not because of loss. But because of 3 tiny miracles who had already captured every piece of her heart. Emma's first months at home with the triplets were a blur of sleepless nights, bottles lined up like tiny soldiers on the kitchen counter, and a constant, overwhelming mixture of exhaustion and gratitude. The girls needed feeding every 2 hours, and since they rarely synchronized their schedules, Emma often slept in 10-minute fragments that left her functioning more on instinct than energy. Even so, she moved through each day with a strange, quiet resolve, driven by a love so consuming it eclipsed the constant ache in her back and the heaviness beneath her eyes. Her parents supported her as much as they could, but Emma insisted on being the one to hold her daughters, soothe them, and rock them to sleep. She told herself she wasn't alone, but motherhood, especially motherhood of 3, had a way of making even a crowded room feel like an island. Slowly, she learned the delicate rhythm of caring for 3 infants at once. Claire preferred to be swaddled tightly and would fuss unless her blanket was wrapped perfectly. Ellie liked sleeping on her mother's chest, tiny hands curled under her chin. Hazel was the quiet observer, staring up at Emma with deep blue eyes that seemed to study every movement. Emma memorized their cries, one sharp, one trembly, one low and insistent, and how to respond to them without hesitation. She kept journals filled with schedules, weights, feeding amounts, and little notes about their personalities as they began to appear. At night, when all 3 were finally asleep, she would sit between their cribs, listening to their breathing, drawing comfort from the sound even while her body begged for rest. Money became a constant worry. Diapers disappeared faster than she could buy them, formula was expensive, and medical checkups for premature triplets were frequent. She took on remote work, writing, editing, anything she could do with one hand while balancing a baby in the other. Sometimes she typed while 2 girls slept on her lap and one nestled against her shoulder. Other times she would work deep into the night, fighting against the exhaustion that blurred her vision. Her parents offered financial help, but Emma refused anything beyond basic support, determined to build stability on her own terms. She didn't want Liam's absence to define their lives, nor did she want charity to fill the space he left behind. As the months passed, the girls grew stronger. They began sitting up, laughing, reaching for toys, and playing with each other in ways that made Emma's heart melt. They shared an instinctive bond. When one cried, the other 2 turned their heads. When one laughed, the others followed. Watching them interact felt like witnessing something magical, a universe of connection that existed only between them. Emma often sat on the floor and let the girls crawl over her, their little fingers tugging at her shirt, their bright eyes watching her with a trust that made every sacrifice worth it. Still, there were moments when loneliness wrapped around her like a cold blanket. Nights when she sat on the couch with a baby in each arm and another crying in a crib, and she felt her strength waver. There were evenings when she watched other families through their windows, parents sharing dinner, couples pushing strollers together, and wondered if she would ever have that kind of stability. The memory of Liam's final words haunted her during those quiet hours, echoing through the walls of her mind until she forced herself to silence it by looking at her daughters, reminding herself that she had chosen them wholeheartedly. The turning point came unexpectedly during one of their routine pediatric visits. The doctor, an older woman with gentle hands and warm eyes, examined each girl with practiced motions. After checking their lungs, measuring their length, and weighing them twice to be sure, she lifted her gaze to Emma. "You're doing an incredible job," she said. Emma blinked in surprise, not accustomed to receiving praise for something that felt like survival. "You really are," the doctor continued. "Triplets are hard. Premature triplets even harder. Some mothers burn out, some break down, some walk away. But your girls are thriving. That means you're carrying more than your share, and you're doing it beautifully." Emma felt her throat tighten. She nodded, swallowing back tears she didn't want to shed in a doctor's office. The validation pierced something inside her, something she didn't know needed healing. For the first time in months, she felt seen not as a struggling mother but as a strong one. Back home she moved through her day differently, with a little more confidence in her steps and a little more light in her chest. She played music while she fed the girls, danced around the living room holding them in her arms, laughed freely when they giggled at her exaggerated expressions. Her exhaustion didn't disappear, but it became easier to carry. As the triplets approached 1 year, Emma began venturing out more, short walks to the park, visits to the local market, afternoons at the community center where other parents gathered. People stared often at the triple stroller, whispering admiration or curiosity, and some offered help carrying bags or opening doors. Emma always accepted the kindness but kept her heart guarded. She wasn't ready to let new people in deeply. Her whole world revolved around 3 little girls, and she wasn't willing to share that world carelessly. But life often has its own plans, unfolding in ways that catch even the strongest hearts off guard. And as Emma settled into a fragile but steady routine, believing she had sealed off every crack through which her past could slip back into her life, fate quietly prepared a moment that would soon tear open everything she thought she had closed. Because on a cold winter morning, with snowflakes drifting like feathers through the gray sky, Emma wheeled the triple stroller down a quiet street toward the bakery she loved. She had no idea that just around the corner, the past she had escaped was about to collide with her future in a way she could never have predicted. Emma didn't notice anything unusual at first. She was focused on the girls, adjusting their mittens, tucking their blankets more snugly around their legs, brushing a few snowflakes from Claire's eyelashes as the toddler blinked up at her in confusion. The bakery door chimed behind her as someone stepped out, and she murmured a polite apology as she maneuvered the stroller aside. Her mind was already moving ahead. She needed bread, maybe some soup for the evening, and if the girls stayed calm long enough, she might even treat herself to a hot chocolate. Small comforts meant everything these days. She hadn't yet lifted her eyes when she heard a familiar voice nearby. It was muffled by the cold air and the hum of passing cars, but unmistakable. A voice she had once known like her own heartbeat. Deep, smooth, confident. A voice that had once felt like home and later like the echo of her worst pain. Liam. Her breath froze before the rest of her did. It felt as though the world skidded to a halt around her, the snow, the cars, the distant chatter. Emma's fingers tightened around the stroller handle. She wanted, instinctively, to turn away, to rush somewhere, anywhere, before he noticed her. She was not ready for this. Not prepared. Not shielded. But the girls chose that moment to giggle in unison, drawn to something behind her. And that was all it took. Liam's conversation faltered mid-sentence. The air shifted. Slowly, Emma raised her head. And there he was. Standing beside a black SUV, wrapped in an expensive charcoal coat, dark hair dusted with snow, electric blue eyes staring at the triple stroller as if someone had just ripped open the sky. His phone slipped from his hand and landed soundlessly in the snow, forgotten the instant it fell. His gaze moved from one baby to the next, then to the third, and Emma watched the moment comprehension dawned. It hit him like a physical blow. He took a step forward, then another, his expression unraveling completely. She had seen him confident, angry, dismissive, proud. But she had never seen him undone. Emma. His voice cracked around her name. Are they? She didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't allow herself to soften. The old wound inside her flickered painfully, but she kept her spine straight. Yes, she said, her voice low, steady, practiced through sleepless nights for a moment she hoped would never come. They're yours. The word struck him with visible force. His breath stuttered, his shoulders sagged, and he reached out as if needing to steady himself against the stroller, but he stopped inches before touching it, as though afraid he didn't have the right. His gaze swept over their faces again, lingering on their identical features, on the soft brown curls peeking from beneath winter hats, on the unmistakable blue eyes that matched his. My God, he whispered, barely audible. 3 triplets, Emma replied, glancing down at them. They're 1.5 years. He let out a shaky exhale, the kind a man makes when everything he ever believed collapses beneath him. His jaw clenched, his throat worked, and his eyes reddened, not from cold, but from something raw and painful. "You never told me," he said, voice hoarse. Emma's laugh was soft, sharp, and entirely humorless. "Liam, you slammed the door in my face and told me it was my fault. You didn't want to know anything about them. Or me." His shoulders tightened. Shame washed over his features, deep and unfiltered. "I know what I said. I remember every word. And I've replayed them more times than I can count." Emma felt a flicker of anger mix with something else, perhaps fear, perhaps old hurt that still felt too fresh. "Good," she said quietly. "Maybe remembering is the least you deserve." He nodded, swallowing hard. "You're right." Silence fell between them, heavy but not empty. Liam knelt slowly beside the stroller, lowering himself until he was at eye level with the girls. They stared back at him curiously, their small breaths fogging in the cold air. One of them, Ellie, reached out toward him with a mittened hand, and Liam's face crumpled. He covered his mouth with one hand as if trying to hold back something breaking loose inside him. "They're beautiful," he said softly, voice trembling. "They're extraordinary." Emma's chest ached at the sincerity in his tone. She wasn't ready to forgive, wasn't ready to open doors she had spent so long sealing shut. But she couldn't deny that the sight of him looking at their daughters, really looking, made something shift inside her, small and dangerous and warm despite the cold. Liam forced himself to look up at her again, eyes glassy. May I know their names?" She hesitated, the moment stretching long enough for a gust of wind to swirl snow between them. Then, quietly, she answered. "Claire, Ellie, and Hazel." He repeated the names under his breath as if engraving them into his memory. Another silence followed, but this one was different, charged with something unsaid, something waiting. "Emma," he finally whispered, "I am so sorry." She stiffened, heat rising behind her eyes. She had dreamed of hearing those words once. She had begged the universe for them. But now, they felt too late, too fragile, too small compared to what she had endured. "You can't rewrite the past," she said. "And you can't fix everything with an apology." "I know." Liam nodded slowly, pain in his eyes. "But maybe I can try to be someone better now." Emma didn't respond. She didn't trust herself to speak. Her heart felt tangled, between anger, grief, fear, and the faintest spark of something she didn't want to name yet. The girls babbled, breaking the tension. Hazel clapped her hands. Claire tried to wiggle out of the blanket. Ellie smiled up at Liam with a sweetness that made him close his eyes for a second, as though it physically hurt. Finally, Emma pulled the stroller handle and took a step back. "I need to go." Liam rose to his feet, watching her with a look that held both desperation and restraint. "Will I see you again?" She didn't promise anything. She didn't owe him anything. "We'll see," she said quietly. Then she turned and walked away, the triple stroller rolling through the snow, carrying her daughters, her strength, her future, while behind her stood a man who had just realized what he lost. And what he had never stopped wanting. Emma tried to pretend the encounter hadn't shaken her, but the truth followed her home like a shadow. She fed the girls lunch, played with them on the living room rug, read them picture books, tucked them in for a nap, yet every quiet moment was filled with the memory of Liam kneeling in the snow, eyes wide and broken, staring at the children he hadn't known existed. Her emotions swirled like a storm she couldn't outrun. Anger tangled with something softer, something dangerous, something she didn't want to examine too closely. She told herself she didn't care if he regretted anything. She told herself she didn't want him involved. She told herself he didn't deserve to know them, much less be near them. But her heart, traitorous and tired, carried the image of Ellie reaching for him and the way he nearly crumbled under the weight of that innocent gesture. The next morning, Emma stepped outside to find a small package at her door. No note, no signature, just a box wrapped simply. Inside were 3 sets of winter mittens, handmade, with tiny embroidered initials, C, E, H. Alongside them was a modest envelope containing a gift card to the local grocery store. Not lavish, not flashy, nothing that could be interpreted as buying forgiveness. Just useful, thoughtful, quietly offered. She didn't need to guess who had left it. For a long moment she stood in the doorway, hands trembling slightly as she stared at the gifts, unsure whether to feel touched or angry. His attempts continued. Softly at first, almost cautiously. He didn't show up in person, didn't force conversation, didn't push himself into their lives. Instead, he appeared around the edges of her days, always close enough to show intention, never close enough to demand acknowledgement. She would catch glimpses of him across the park, sitting on a far bench while the girls played, keeping his distance but never taking his eyes off them. At the grocery store, a cashier once quietly mentioned that someone had paid for her order ahead of time. The same thing happened at the pharmacy a week later. Emma felt conflicted, gratitude mixed with resentment, and each kind gesture pulled at parts of her she had carefully walled off. One snowy afternoon she found him shoveling her parents' driveway. He wasn't wearing a fancy coat or gloves, just a simple jacket, hair dusted white, breath-forming clouds in the cold air as he worked. She stepped onto the porch, arms crossed, heart pounding for reasons she didn't want to name. When he looked up and saw her, he froze like a guilty teenager caught doing something forbidden. "I wasn't trying to bother you," he said, voice rough. "Your father's back has been hurting. I thought I could help." Emma hesitated, torn between admiration and the old instinct to protect herself. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," Liam replied. "That's why I wanted to." She didn't answer, but she didn't send him away, and that alone felt like a shift. The girls were the first to bridge the gap between them. Children had no memory of slammed doors or harsh words, all they recognized was presence. One morning, when Emma struggled to lift the triple stroller over an icy curb, Liam appeared beside her without warning. He didn't say anything at first, he simply took the front end of the stroller, lifting it gently, making sure none of the girls were jostled. Claire squealed at him, Hazel clapped her hands, and Ellie reached out again as though she remembered him from that first encounter. Emma's heart clenched painfully at the sight. Liam looked like he was fighting tears again but held himself together as he said, "Do you mind if I walk with you for a bit?" Every part of her wanted to say no. Every part of her was terrified to say yes. But the girls were already smiling at him, and her resolve weakened enough for her to nod once. Just for a short walk. They walked in silence at first, the only sounds being the crunch of snow under their boots and the soft babbling of the girls. Liam didn't try to fill the quiet, didn't bombard her with apologies, didn't reach for them or for her. He simply walked beside her, matching her pace, glancing at the girls with a mixture of awe and heartbreak. After several minutes he finally spoke. "Emma, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect a chance. I just need you to know I'm trying. I know I can't undo what I said. I know I'll regret that moment for the rest of my life. But I want to be someone who doesn't run anymore." His voice cracked on the last word. Emma felt something shift in her chest, not forgiveness, not yet, but a loosening of the tight knot she'd carried for so long. "I don't know what you want from me," she said quietly. "I want to be in their lives," he admitted. "In whatever way you allow. I want to earn your trust even if it takes years. And if someday you let me, I want to know you again. Not the way it was before. Not rushed, not careless. I want to know you the way I should have from the beginning." Emma's breath trembled as she stared straight ahead, unable to look at him. The truth was heavy and aching. She had missed him once, deeply. She had loved him once, painfully. And now, seeing him broken and changing and trying, she didn't know what to feel. "You're saying things that are easy to say now," she whispered. "But you weren't there when I was terrified. When I couldn't afford formula. When I couldn't sleep. You weren't the one holding their hands in the NICU." "I know," Liam said softly. "And I will spend the rest of my life trying to make up for it." She turned then, finally meeting his eyes, and what she saw there startled her. It wasn't charm. It wasn't entitlement. It wasn't pride. It was vulnerability, raw and unguarded, and something that looked very much like devotion. The walk ended shortly after, but the moment lingered inside her long after Liam left. For the first time since their daughters were born, Emma didn't feel completely alone. She didn't trust him, not yet, but she couldn't deny that he had already begun reshaping himself into someone different, someone better. The girls slept soundly that night, curled up in their matching pajamas, and Emma sat beside them, her heart filled with thoughts she wasn't ready to unravel. She didn't know what the future held, but something told her that this was only the beginning, of healing, of reckoning, of the story she never expected to continue. Emma never imagined that trust, something shattered so violently, could begin to rebuild itself in a series of small, almost invisible moments. It didn't happen in any grand way. There were no dramatic confessions, no sweeping gestures that erased the past. Instead, change arrived in quiet increments, in the space between ordinary days, in the gentle persistence of a man trying to rewrite who he was without asking for anything in return. Liam began showing up in ways Emma didn't expect. He volunteered at the community center on days he knew she took the girls there to play. He never hovered, instead, he stayed at a respectful distance, organizing toys, stacking mats, cleaning up spills, blending into the background like a quiet guardian. Yet the girls always noticed him. Claire would toddle toward him with determined steps, Ellie would lift her arms for him to pick her up, and Hazel would keep her eyes fixed on him with a studious curiosity that made him smile despite himself. At first Emma tried to intervene quickly, gently guiding the girls back toward her, unsure of how much closeness she could allow. But with each visit she saw that Liam didn't take her children's affection for granted. Every time one of the girls reached for him, he looked to Emma first, seeking permission, seeking reassurance that he wasn't overstepping. His restraint softened something inside her, a guarded place that had long braced for disappointment. One morning at the center, as the girls tumbled in a pile of colorful foam blocks, Claire slipped and bumped her head. The sound of her cry sliced through the air. Emma lunged forward, but Liam was already there. He scooped Claire up gently, murmuring calm reassurances as her tiny body trembled. He didn't panic, didn't fumble, he simply held her with a tenderness that didn't need words. Claire pressed her face into his neck, sobbing softly, her little hands clutching his collar. Emma reached them seconds later, breathless, heart pounding. She expected Claire to reach immediately for her, but the toddler kept her arms locked around Liam, burrowing deeper into his shoulder as he rubbed slow circles on her back. Liam looked up at Emma, panic flickering through his eyes as though afraid she would misinterpret the moment. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "She slipped before I could." Emma shook her head. The sight before her, her daughter clinging to the man she once loved, the man who had broken her, hit her with a force she didn't expect. Claire trusted him. Not because of anything he'd done in the past, but because of who he was becoming right now. "It's okay," Emma whispered, her voice softer than she intended. "She feels safe with you." Liam blinked, and for a moment he looked like he might break down entirely. He held Claire a little tighter, lowering his forehead to hers as she sniffled. Emma watched them, something warm and fragile blooming in her chest, something she wanted to protect and fear at the same time. Over the next weeks, Liam slipped cautiously into their routine. He walked with them to the park, always carrying an extra bag of snacks and water like he had memorized every need 3 toddlers might have. He learned which girl liked blueberries, which one preferred pretzels, and which one would only drink from the pink cup. He pushed the stroller up steep hills without being asked. He held umbrellas over them when it rained. He stayed late at the center when he noticed Emma was overwhelmed, offering quiet help without making her feel inadequate. The girls adored him. They shrieked with excitement when they saw him approaching, their little feet pounding the ground as they ran to him. He lifted them easily, one on each hip, another on his shoulders, laughing through the weight of them, though Emma could see the strain in his arms. But he never complained. He seemed almost grateful for the burden. Gradually, Emma began to let him in, not fully, not without hesitation, but enough to acknowledge that he was no longer the man who had slammed a door in her face. One afternoon, after a long walk, she found herself inviting him inside her parents' home for tea, not out of obligation, but out of a quiet, tentative willingness to share space with him. They sat at the kitchen table while the girls napped, steam rising from their cups. The silence between them wasn't tense anymore. It was warm, thoughtful, filled with unspoken questions neither of them rushed to answer. Liam finally broke the quiet with a confession spoken so softly Emma almost missed it. "I want to deserve them." She looked up slowly, meeting his eyes. "They already think you do." He shook his head. "They love easily. They don't know what I did." Emma swallowed, her chest tightening with old pain. "I know what you did. I remember everything." "I wish you didn't," he whispered. His voice was raw, stripped of ego, stripped of excuses. "But I know wishing doesn't change anything. All I can do now is show them, who I am trying to be." Emma didn't respond immediately. She didn't trust words as much as she once had. She had learned that promises could be broken as easily as breath. But the man sitting across from her, hands wrapped around a mug, eyes tired yet earnest, was not the man who had walked away. This man was choosing them every day, piece by piece, without expectation or pressure. Later that week, as evening settled across the sky in soft purple hues, Emma found herself sitting next to Liam on a park bench while the girls chased each other in giggling circles. He kept glancing at her, as though trying to read her thoughts, but she remained quiet, focused on the sight of their daughters stumbling through the grass. After a long silence, she finally said, "I never thought you'd be here." He exhaled slowly. "I never thought I deserved to be." The honesty in his voice made her throat tighten. She looked away, unsure how to respond, unsure how to navigate the fragile, shifting landscape between them. She wasn't ready to forgive him, not fully. But she also wasn't willing to deny what was unfolding, something tender, something fragile, something real. The girls ran to them then, all three climbing onto the bench with their usual chaotic determination. Claire settled onto Emma's lap, Ellie wedged herself between them, and Hazel climbed directly onto Liam's knee, resting her head against his chest as though she had always belonged there. Emma watched the moment, watched how naturally he held her, how gently he balanced Hazel with one arm as he wiped Ellie's nose with the other. A warmth spread through her, slow but steady, as she realized something she hadn't dared admit. Her daughters didn't just love him. They needed him. And maybe, though she wasn't ready to say it aloud, she did too, in a different way, a deeper way she was still too afraid to explore. One thing was certain, though. The man she once believed incapable of love was proving, day by day, that he had more of it to give than she ever imagined. And Emma was beginning to wonder if letting him back into their lives wasn't a risk. But the first step towards something she thought she had lost forever. Emma didn't expect the final shift to happen on an ordinary afternoon, but life rarely followed the timing she anticipated. It was early spring, the air still cool but filled with the scent of thawing earth, and she had taken the girls to the park where they loved to wander among the budding trees. The sunlight shimmered across patches of grass, and the girls toddled around chasing bubbles Liam created with a giant wand he'd brought, one of those simple toys that made them squeal with delight. Emma watched from a nearby bench, arms wrapped around herself, letting the scene settle into her heart like something she wasn't sure she deserved to witness. Liam looked different these days. Softer in some ways, stronger in others. He laughed easily with the girls, knelt when they tugged at his coat, carried them even when his arms were tired, and answered their babbling questions with a patience she had once believed impossible for him. He wasn't pretending. She could see that now. His transformation wasn't a performance, it was a truth unfolding slowly, layer by layer, shaped by remorse, determination, and a love he had once been too blind to recognize. After nearly an hour, the wind shifted and a chill crept into the air. Emma called the girls over, planning to head home before they became fussy. Claire ran first, then Ellie, but Hazel lagged behind, distracted by a cluster of daffodils near the path. In one moment she was toddling toward them, and in the next she stumbled hard, her cry piercing the quiet park. Emma bolted from the bench, but before she reached her, Liam was already there. He scooped Hazel into his arms, pressing her against his chest with a panic in his movements that mirrored Emma's own heart. Hazel's wail cut through the stillness, trembling and pained, and Liam's face changed instantly. His fear was raw, unguarded, the kind that came from loving someone with a depth he couldn't hide. He held her tightly, rocking gently, whispering, "It's okay, sweetheart, I've got you, I've got you. You're safe." Hazel clung to him, tiny fingers digging into the fabric of his coat, her cries slowly softening. Emma reached them, breathless, but Hazel didn't reach for her, not immediately. Instead she buried her face deeper into Liam's shoulder, her small body trembling as she pressed into the reassurance she had chosen. Emma froze, the moment hitting her like a wave. This wasn't about preference or convenience. This was trust. Trust earned over months of consistency, patience, and presence. Hazel eventually allowed Emma to take her, but the image of Liam's trembling hands and stricken face remained etched in Emma's mind. They walked home together afterward, the girls worn out and quiet, nestled in the stroller. Liam walked beside her, hands shoved into his coat pockets, eyes fixed on the ground. He looked shaken, as if that one fall had cracked open every fear he'd carried since the morning he discovered he was a father. When they reached her parents' house, Emma turned to him before he had a chance to retreat. "Do you want to come in for a bit?" He nodded silently, and together they brought the girls inside. Her parents were out for the evening, leaving the house unusually quiet. Emma settled the girls in the living room with toys and soft blankets while Liam lingered near the doorway, almost unsure of where he belonged. "You can sit," she said softly, gesturing to the couch. He hesitated only a moment before sitting down, elbows resting on his knees as he watched the girls with a tenderness that tugged at every fragile part of her. Emma sat beside him, not too close, but close enough that she could feel his presence like warmth radiating through the air. After a few minutes of silence he finally spoke. "When Hazel fell, something inside me he paused, searching for the right words. I thought I had lost my chance to protect her before she even knew me. And today it felt like losing her all over again." Emma listened quietly, absorbing every word. "I know I can never erase what I did," he continued, voice thick with regret. "And I know I don't deserve forgiveness simply for showing up now. But I want to spend every day earning the right to be in their lives. And if you'll let me, in yours too." Emma's breath faltered. She stared at him, trying to understand the weight of what he was saying. He wasn't asking for a relationship out of guilt. He wasn't expecting immediate acceptance. He was offering vulnerability, commitment, and truth, things she had once begged him to show. "You hurt me," she said softly, the admission trembling in her chest. "You hurt me in a way I didn't think I'd recover from. And I can't pretend the past didn't happen." He nodded, eyes steady even as pain flickered through them. "I wouldn't ask you to. But..." Emma exhaled slowly, her gaze drifting toward the girls. They were sitting in a tight cluster, sharing toys, occasionally glancing back at the adults as though checking that everything was okay. They love you. They look for you. And I can't ignore that anymore. Liam swallowed, his voice barely above a whisper. And you? Do you look for me? The question settled heavily between them. Emma closed her eyes, letting the truth rise through the fears she had buried. She remembered the slammed door, the tears, the loneliness, but she also remembered the way he carried Hazel in the snow, the quiet gifts, the shoveling, the laughter he brought to the girls' lives. She remembered the man he used to be, and the man he was becoming. When she opened her eyes, her voice was steady. I don't know where this goes. I don't know how to rebuild something that broke so deeply. She paused, heart pounding. But I'm not afraid to try anymore. Liam's breath trembled. Emma saw it, the moment the hope he had guarded so carefully broke through the surface. He reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. When his fingers brushed hers, she didn't move. Their hands intertwined in a way that felt tentative, fragile, but real. The girls noticed first. Hazel toddled over, placing her small hand on their joined ones as if sealing the moment with her own quiet approval. Claire followed, then Ellie, piling into their laps with giggles and warmth. Liam wrapped an arm around them instinctively, eyes shining with emotion he no longer tried to hide. Emma looked at her daughters, then at the man beside her. She felt the weight of the past, yes, but she also felt the promise of something new, something rebuilt from truth instead of illusion. She leaned her head lightly against Liam's shoulder, allowing herself to rest there for the first time in years. And in that simple, gentle gesture, she knew. This wasn't the ending of their story. It was the beginning of the life she thought she had lost, a life where love didn't come in bursts of perfection, but in small, steady acts of choosing each other again and again.